Hi, and welcome to the Unfertile to Unfiltered podcast, a space where we talk honestly about infertility, motherhood, and the wild, beautiful, heartbreaking, and hilarious journey of being a woman.
We're your hosts, Simona
and Vicki,
two friends who have walked through IVF, loss, exhaustion, joy, and everything in between.
We started this podcast because we know what it feels like to search for stories that sound like yours and come up empty. We wanted to create the kind of space we needed, one where nothing is off limits and no experience is ever too messy to talk about.
You'll hear us talk about the parts no one warns you about, the hormone shots, the baby showers after miscarriage, feeling lost in motherhood, and trying to remember who you are underneath it all.
We'll also bring on guests, experts, moms, and women with stories you won't forget to help all of us feel a little more seen and a little less alone.
This is a space for honesty, for healing, and for humor, because if we don't laugh through this stuff sometimes, we might cry forever.
So grab your cup of something, coffee, wine, your third reheated tea, and settle in.
This is Unfertile to Unfiltered, and we are so glad that you're here.
Hello, and welcome back to Unfertile to Unfiltered podcast with me, Vicki, and
Simona.
So we are so excited. It is episode 2. Thank you for giving us a listen to all of you out there. We've been receiving some really great feedback and comments, and we just love that there is a place for this podcast, right? I think we're both
absolutely
so excited. Yeah, absolutely. This episode 2 and then also episode 3 are very close to our hearts. We are going to be diving in today to Simona's fertility journey and her story a little bit more, because obviously us wanting to do this podcast came from places in our lives, chapters in our lives, experiences, whatever you want to call them, that really make us want to support and connect and send out our love to all women, mothers, anyone going through challenges. And fertility is one road that we unfortunately have both had to travel. So,
absolutely.
Something that Simona,
we don't wish upon anybody.
Never. Yes. So Simona, how about you take it away?
Gladly. Like you said, this is definitely, unfortunately, the biggest thing that reconnected us. And, we don't wish this upon our worst enemy. There's a saying, though, that says, worst club, best members. So it's definitely the best people within this community for sure. So my journey with infertility started back in about 2017, 2018. And I want to start with saying that I had no idea what infertility was. I really didn't, because I was in my own little bubble. And I was diagnosed with secondary infertility. So I had my son in 2016, a few years after we had gotten married. So, my life was on track to how I had it envisioned in my head. We had my son, he was healthy, he was happy, he was also very, very busy. That became my excuse.
Sure.
Once he was close to turning 2, my husband and I had started to have conversations. We started trying, and that also brought along questions from other people. When are you going to have another baby? As people like to pry, whenever you're close to that 2-year mark of anything, 2 years of marriage, people start asking you when you're going to have a baby. When the baby turns close to 2, that's when the questions started up for us. And, my excuse would be, oh, Tyler's so busy. We have enough on our plates. That was my line all the time. It was on repeat. I would just use that all the time. So 2018, my son turned 2. We had started trying naturally on our own without any scientific help. We had tracked, using an app. We started using ovulation sticks once it got into like 7, 8 months of trying. Um, for our son, we didn't need any help, but it did take us a bit of time. I want to say like around 7 months, which really doesn't sound like a lot, but you know, it it was starting. So when I think about it, maybe something was there. And like I said in the first episode, every child is a miracle because it really is
Oh,
a
yes.
miracle that they're here, right?
Yeah.
When we think
Yeah.
about the science that we were not taught of in high school, it was all the ways of how to prevent a pregnancy.
Yes. It's so true. It's so true.
It's so true. So, it is a miracle of how they're here. But so once we started trying and we were about 6, 7 months in, I realized I knew deep down something was wrong. I was like, this is around the same time that it took to get pregnant with Tyler. Like this is doesn't feel right. But we kept going. Then, came to a year marker, still trying, and we were, slowly getting defeated. I remember I went to my gynecologist for my annual exam or whatever it was, and I broke down in tears with her. And it's the same doctor I see now. I love her. Um, yeah, I broke down and she goes, "Okay, we're gonna refer you to RMA, Reproductive Medicine Associates." And here in Jersey, the headquarters was Basking Ridge, and so that's where we went. And we didn't get started right away. I think that was about January of 2019. Yeah, because all of 2018 we tried on our own with tracking and ovulation sticks. And then 2019, my doctor referred us, but we were like, let's just try a couple more months. So we didn't officially get started until like March of 2019. We went to RMA, and they were amazing. Dr. Molinaro was our doctor, and he was so patient and he listened to our story. He listened to us. Then we went on to do all of the initial testing. We tested my husband's sperm, we tested my eggs, we did the HSG. I forget like the actual term because it's really hard to say, but it's where, do you remember what it is?
Yes, no, of course. And I remember that actually being a very uncomfortable test.
Oh
Very
my God, that was
uncomfortable.
so uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember what the
Yes.
name is? I don't remember. I think hystero something,
Yes, I was going to say. Yes.
but it's the HSGs, the for short, and it's where they put dye into your fallopian tubes and kind of you see it on the ultrasound monitor. My husband was with me and it was at the hospital, and they put the dye through your tubes and they watch it to make sure that there's no blockages in your tubes, because apparently it can be more common too with C-sections, which I had with my son. So, and so many people had said, or I had heard of, um, that that can like quote unquote flush your fallopian tubes and help you to get pregnant even quicker after.
Yes.
Some people have had that happen. That was not the case for me.
I
They
actually
found
knew someone
nothing.
who had had that happen, and I remember them being like, "Oh,
Really?
I might also have to go through fertility," and then they ended up having the HSG done, which I looked it up just now, and I'm going to tell you all, and I'm going to probably butcher this, but it's the hysterosalpingogram. That
Yeah,
was
that
so
was
not
really
right.
good.
Every fertility doctor or gynecologist right now is like, no,
Oh
that
my God.
was not right.
I knew it was a really long, hard name.
It is, and it's extremely uncomfortable for any of, I mean,
It's,
maybe I just have a
yes,
really low pain threshold, but I will tell you,
no, that was
uncomfortable.
uncomfortable. Like an
Mm-hmm.
uncomfortable, I feel like it's putting it nicely. Like you had
Yes.
cramping after. That was like, it was burning. Yeah, it was super uncomfortable.
Yes.
Um, and it was in like a scary room too. I remember being in a scary room on a table and I was just like,
Oh my gosh, that's awful.
oh, and
That's
like I'm like, great,
awful.
this is the start of this shit. Fabulous. And like my husband is not good with like all the medical stuff either at all. I mean, and
Mm,
I'll tell you about that later, but anyway, so we did the HSG and of course everything was fine. All of our testing came back okay. You had to also do a genetic history and a genetic testing and test for any diseases on both of us. So blood work and all that stuff. Um, and everything came up okay. Our genetic history was okay. At first, they thought it was my husband's sperm, but then later on in our journey, it was okay. They said, that looks all right. Then we thought maybe it was my eggs, the quality of my eggs. Um, but so we moved on. Um, After our HSG and initial testing, come April of 2019, we started, like what I like to say, the first phase. So
yeah.
since we were both quote unquote young, we were younger than 35. We were both in relatively good health. Like there was no other underlying factors. They started us off with the basics. So for layman's terms, the basics phase one for us was Clomid. And of course, like I want to say too, like this isn't like what happens with everybody. It all depends on everyone's body and everybody's uh, health history. Um, so every recommendation and medication is different for every single person. Um, you might hear that other people have gone on Clomid or done IVF and IUI, but there's definitely more to the story. Um,
Can I ask you a quick question?
Absolutely.
What was your experience like on Clomid? Because I mean, we both went to RMA, now referred to as Illume.
Hmm.
But we both went to RMA, and I remember hearing it kind of go around. It was like the whispers of like the Clomid crazies. That's literally what they
Yes.
would reference.
I mean, I'm gonna be very honest. I kind of blocked out everything, most symptoms, except for like IVF. But I will tell you right now, hands down, I was a little crazy beforehand. On all of these treatments, I was definitely crazy. So you could chalk it up to Clomid, but there's probably other factors.
Yeah, it's always very interesting to hear different people's experiences with the medications, right? How some people are so
Yes,
sensitive to it, whereas others are like, nope, I went through years of IVF and it never disrupted me emotionally or physically, which I'm going to be truthful. I can't believe that that's
I don't know
actually the
how that
case.
happens. Absolutely
Well,
not.
so I figured I was like, I was going to ask you, like, did you ever experience like the Clomid crazies? Because that was
I've
the
heard that
saying.
for
I
sure.
know.
Yeah, I've definitely heard that. I mean, I'm sure it affected me, but like I honestly blocked that part out to be quite honest.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, so we took Clomid. It was like popping, a birth control pill. I honestly forget how often I had to do that, but it was at least once or twice a day. It might have even been 3 times a day. But
Oh,
that
so
stimulates
much.
I know, yeah, it stimulates your ovaries. Um, and helps to produce more eggs. If I'm remembering correctly, don't quote me. I will look that up. But yeah, all the medications were to help your quality of eggs, to help produce more eggs, to help stimulate your body to get ready for a baby. So that didn't work. We had to do 2 rounds. We did 2 rounds of Clomid. Everything failed, and then we had to do timed intercourse with that. So it wasn't fun really anymore. This was your job. You tried to make it fun, you tried to make it enjoyable, right? But it was stressful, stressful. And
Sure.
it was definitely stressful for my husband too. Like it's stressful for both people involved, all people involved. It might take more than just two people. Um, so yeah, it was incredibly stressful, and those cycles failed. So then we moved on to ovulation injections. So instead of taking a pill, I was injecting myself in my stomach, um, with even more intense medication. So it was again to stimulate the ovaries to produce more follicles. Um, and then we would do what was called like a trigger shot. So the trigger shot would release the egg or eggs. Um, and then you would have, uh, again, turned intercourse, um, and hope for the best. We did 2 rounds of that. Didn't work. So 2 rounds for, logistics, that's about 2 months, give or take more time. Let's say maybe it's a little over a month, because in between you would also have to wait for your period to come and all of that fun stuff. You would have to call your clinic, right? On day one. Mm, day one, so happy, let's call my nurse. That was, oh, it's, I was never so aware of my body during this process, until this process, like you knew when you would get your period or whatever. And that was pretty much it, at least for me. I was never like so in tune to what my body was doing
Yeah,
until this,
yeah,
you
for
know?
sure.
So, and I have to say, like, we were pretty lucky with our insurance. Um, I'm a teacher, so my insurance was pretty good. It didn't cover everything, um, but it covered a good amount. We were still paying a lot out of pocket, like whether it was co-pays or for the medication, there was a good amount of money. And keep in mind, like, every part of this process, we were going into my clinic. So the clinic, was about a half an hour or so from my house, and we would have to go to morning monitoring hours. Um, so that means you would go to your clinic and you would see your doctor. You would first get blood work, or vice versa, depending on the weight. Um, and you would get blood work drawn, and then you would go to see your doctor and get an ultrasound and a pelvic exam, um, just to see. So they monitor you to see how your body's doing on all of these medications, and see, you check your lining, check the eggs, everything. So it was literally having a full doctor's appointment before you would go to work. The morning monitoring hours was from 6 to 8 a.m. It might have even been longer, but I had to get there by 6 a.m. so that there was not a long line, because John would watch Tyler while I went to the doctor. I left by like 5:20, 5:30 in the morning. I got myself ready for work before I left, because I never knew what it was going to be like. And then I would rush over there, get there around 6, get all my stuff done, and then would have to rush back for John to make it to work on time. And he had to be at work by like 7:30. So I would get back, get
So let me
Tyler.
just say, so you
Yes.
would be sitting, so you'd be, you're already going through a stressful situation. You're
Mm-hmm.
emotionally and physically going through all of the things when it comes to fertility treatments. And you had to get there super early in the morning,
Yeah.
probably running on no energy,
Right.
and then rush to work and have to then navigate and deal with other people's children all day.
Yeah.
You
Yep.
are a saint. You are truly a saint.
Heck. Hey, we all are. If we didn't kill somebody along this journey, we're all saints.
It's true. It's so
It's so
true.
true.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes.
Um, yeah, it was like, honestly, thinking back to the whole journey, right? When you're, at least for me, when I was in the thick of it, I was just like, okay, on to the next thing. Like, I was just like a robot. Okay,
Yeah.
whatever. But now thinking back, it's like, what the heck? That is a lot to deal with
Sure.
for day in and day out, for months to years. Like, it's a lot.
Yeah, of
Um,
course.
so yeah, so by the time I would get back from morning monitoring hours, literally I would say goodbye. John would go off to work. Then I'd get because I would have to be at work by 8:20. I would get back probably by like 7, I don't know, 7:15 or something like that. Get all the stuff and then head in the car because my job at the time was at least a half hour away. And the clinic, to go, some days I went from the clinic straight to my work. It was a lot. Doing all of that before then going to have to teach my second graders at the time. It was rough, you know.
Tough age.
So, and I had quite a class when I was
Yes.
going through this. It was like
Hmm.
literally all the ingredients for a recipe for health. Like it was a time. It was a time. Um, so fast forward, that was like the daily logistics, waking up early, going to the doctors, going to teach, and then you would also during the day, you would wait for your nurse to call you. Like you would have your own private nurse, right? Like private. You would have a nurse that you would have their number, you could call them, ask them questions, any symptoms you were having, and then they would be the ones who would usually call you with like your blood work results and anything else. So you would also wait for that phone call. You would be watching the clock every single day. Like, and I had it down to like the minute, like, okay, it was around 9 or 10. That's when I would get the phone call. Um, Sometimes it would be maybe, lunchtime, but you got it down to a science, right? You watch the clock. So that was the daily basis. So we did Clomid phase one. Then we did ovulation injections, what I call phase two. And then I wasn't allowed to move on to the next treatment option until I did at least 2 rounds of each one, according to my insurance. And I
It's pretty
think
standard. I mean, it actually
it's
is,
pretty
it's
standard.
very,
Yeah.
it is. It's pretty standard because I had the same experience where it's like, unfortunately, right? Insurance companies, this is the flaw. We're just going to make a side comment as a therapist here about my opinions of insurance companies, but insurance
Yeah.
companies are a very flawed system, right? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, there's
Yes.
benefits and perks to our, medical care system, but then,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I remember thinking, wow, to have to fail something, something so dear to your heart, right? Wanting to have a
Yeah.
child, wanting to add to your family, to then be approved to move on to the next phase or level of fertility treatments. It,
Yeah.
it felt
Like
very
they
backwards to me.
absolutely, it's so backwards and they're dictating your life pretty much. Like, and I'll talk about that in one of the next parts that when we got to IUI, after our ovulation injections, we went on to IUI, and I was thinking, okay, maybe this is it. And you read like, oh, there's such high chances of having twins when you do IUI, and I'm like, great, jackpot, I'll be done because I had thought I was gonna have 3 kids.
Oh
No,
my
no,
goodness.
no. So, you have all these expectations. And we go to do IUI. Again, that's also where you're doing injections and these injections happen for weeks at a time, like not just like a couple days. And again, that all depends on your doctor's protocol and your body. But for me, I counted, it was like, I think it was like 12 to 14 days um, for most of them. And like when you're injecting yourself, you also have to follow like the video and the directions, and also like, oh, make sure you don't inject yourself from the one that you did last night. So, my entire stomach, as I'm sure yours was, and many of the listeners listening,
Yeah.
had bruises and bumps and soreness and bloating. Like that's definitely something I remember. Like I put on a lot of weight throughout that journey. I was bloated. I was irritable. God, I was emotional. As how can
Sure.
you not
Yeah.
be? I mean, so we did the injections, and then yeah, then you still had to do the trigger shot, and you would come in for what I call the turkey baster, where this one was really fun. This time, instead of just me going to the clinic, we both had to be there. John would have to go and give his sperm donation right
Hmm.
before me. And so that was a juggling act. I would stay home because my family's not close. My family is in Connecticut, in New Jersey. A couple of my dear friends like were planning to help me and jump in whenever we needed, and I was so grateful for that. Um, but it was also 6 o'clock in the morning. I would need people at my house at 5:30 in the morning.
Yeah,
That
it's
just
tough.
didn't work out that.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
John went in, he would go give his donation, then he would come back, he'd take Tyler, I would go in, and I would go in and they would use the turkey baster. It literally looked like a turkey baster, and
Yes.
they would insert the sperm inside of me for everybody who doesn't know. And that's it. You would hope for the best and hope that they met each other and that it implanted and you had a happy ending, but it did not. We did one round, actually, one round of that. We ended up doing two, but after the first round failed, it wasn't my nurse who called me, it was my doctor. And I didn't think anything of it when I saw, like, I remember I was in my office. Yeah, that was like my happy space. That was my craft room. And I got a call. I didn't see the number. I think it was a blocked call. I was like, who is this? And I just answered it. And then I heard my doctor, and I didn't think, oh shit, it's my doctor. He never calls until
Yeah.
after the
Yeah.
fact. And he kept talking and he said, and I remember his words. I walked out to the hallway and I called John, and he was like, um, I'm really sorry. It didn't work. Um, I really think we should move on to IVF. And I'm like, oh God. So I was like, okay. And he called my insurance company himself to try and argue that this was not going to work. And after everything didn't work, he knew like we had to go straight to IVF. And I remember driving, I think it was like maybe a couple days later, I remember driving, I was at a stop sign, I see the number come up again, and he goes, I'm really, really sorry. I tried really hard, but they will not approve. They will not pay for your IVF unless you do another round of IUI. And I was like, fuck. And this was the end of the summer of 2019, August of 2019. And again, like in a teacher's mentality, it's like summer's coming to a close. I wanted to have everything done. I wanted to be pregnant. I wanted to not have to worry about this come the start of the new school year. And it wasn't happening. It wasn't. And so that was like, I feel like after every single blow, it took me like a good 3 days to kind of snap out of it. I was like in a dark hole, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
Um, it takes you time to then get ready for, okay, we have to do this all over again, another month. But we did it. We went on. We had a failed second IUI. And at that point, I was low. I was like, I had very, very little hope. Um, and I was also not looking forward to IVF. I was scared of IVF. I knew that it was a lot more involved. There was a lot more medication. There was a lot, just a lot in general compared to everything else. And it, but we had to. I mean, I think we talked about it, and we would have regretted it if we didn't do it.
Sure.
So
Can I
yeah,
ask you a
go
question?
ahead.
You said you were feeling hopeless. You were feeling like here you are and you're in this dark hole.
Yeah.
Were you seeing a therapist during this time?
Great question. Yes, I was, and thank God for that therapist. I knew I needed one. I honestly can't remember the exact date, but it was in the beginning of treatments.
Okay.
Um, yeah, it was probably like a year and a half in that I was seeing a therapist, and she was amazing. And I don't have her anymore because she left for another um, company, but She was so amazing, and she helped me so much, so much. Um, and I'm glad you brought that up because that is huge. Definitely something that if you are on your infertility journey or after or not with just life, therapy is so important. Um,
Yeah.
Definitely one of the number one things that helped saved me throughout that process.
I
Um,
mean, I'm
which
biased, but
I know you and my sister
I'm
both.
biased as one of those therapists. But I was going to say, um, it's amazing to me. I know that a lot of clinics now, fertility clinics, reproductive clinics, um, do offer group therapy, or I don't want to say group therapy, more like
Yes.
support groups, and they also will offer individual sessions, but it's for a certain period of time, and then you discontinue. And I just always found that to be very, I thought that that was great that there was a resource, but I
Yes.
also felt like, okay, when a woman then goes through her pregnancy after going through fertility, and we'll obviously get into that a lot more, I'm sure, as we continue on through our
Yeah.
episodes, but how that impacts you, and you continue to still struggle with some anxiety or depression or trauma responses, right?
For sure.
So, and really needing someone like during the perinatal time. Um,
Yeah.
and especially, the
100%.
postpartum period after having gone through fertility. There's so many pieces, but I'm so happy to hear that you were in therapy during that time.
Yes, yes. That I knew I needed that. I'm glad you brought that part up too, though, because RMA offered, and they still continue to offer,
Yes.
sessions and everything, and group sessions. And for me, and I don't think I mentioned this, but for me, I didn't tell a soul. I told nobody besides our parents and our siblings once we started going through treatments. That's when I told them, I was like, okay, we have to tell people. But that was it. So I was very closed off. I didn't tell anyone, and I felt embarrassed. I felt humiliated. You know, I come from a big Italian family, like, and I love them, but also everybody's having babies and nobody had any issues, at least before I started talking to people, like everything, it was just super hard for me to talk about that at the time when I was really in it. Um, but the group sessions to me didn't they made me nervous. I didn't want to be put. I felt like I was going to be in an awkward situation. That just wasn't for me. So that's why I sought out a
Yeah.
therapist. Um, you know, and that would be something that I would say maybe I wish I tried. Um, but you have to feel comfortable. It's a very vulnerable state, so you have to do with what you feel at the time, you know. Um, but yeah, and this kind of brings me to the next part of my story, which really needed a therapist. Even more so. So it was the fall of 2019. Um, and we were beginning the process of like all the IVF. So IVF, you need to do a retrieval. You need to and retrieve your eggs. There's medication you have to take all before the retrieval. And just like all the shots, I think I was up to like 3 shots a night at one point. And you have your retrieval procedure and you're out on that. Like I remember it was a C-section. It was like I was like a T on the hospital bed, and it was, they came in. I remember I was like, "Oh my God." But I remember walking in and they were playing Aerosmith, and I was like, "Okay, I think it's going to be okay." And let me preface
What
this with
Aerosmith
the
song do you remember?
ah, I want to say it was Walk This Way, but it might not have been. I just remember I was like, Aerosmith is good. And I had seen Aerosmith in concert with my dad and my uncle and my friend Liz in like, I think it was high school. Yeah. Yeah. Crazy story. Anyway, so
I would have boogied
her
in. I would have
aerosol.
just been like in my like gown boogieing in. I've been like, walk this
I was
way.
like, okay, this is good. And because the day before our procedure, you go in the day before and they check your follicles to make sure, everything's okay. And the doctor said to me, hmm, or maybe it was a couple days before. He was like, not as many as I had hoped for. I was like, oh, great. There was only 4 eggs. 4. And like I feel like on average most women have at least 10 or more, maybe even 20. It all depends on each
All
person, but
depends.
right?
I was a obviously because of my own fertility journey, I was a very low producer. So I will say
Okay,
that
you
like to
too.
me, 4 is like, hey girl,
It's good.
hey.
Hey girl, hey.
Girl, hey. But I understand. And actually, I don't know if you know this or if you remember this, but like what they do now is or not just now, but even with us, they used to come into the rooms after a retrieval and tell you the amount of eggs that they retrieved. And now they
Yes,
will only write it down. And I never really put two and two together until I realized and I asked, I said, why do you not say the numbers out loud? It's because, well, at least through my RMA, you're just in these
other
like
people.
basically curtained stations where
Yes.
you're waking up from the anesthesia
Mm-hmm.
and everyone's obviously having very different reactions and different responses. But obviously, it could be very upsetting for a woman who maybe only gets two if you
Of
are the woman
course.
who's maybe getting 12 or 14 or 20 eggs. And
Right.
I actually thought that that was beautifully sensitive, from a therapist
Absolutely.
perspective, but also from a human perspective of, wow, how considerate, especially as someone who getting 2 eggs, right, was
Right.
a win. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
yeah.
For sure. Oh my God. And I remember, I even see it in my head, like the post-it writing 6. So we ended up getting 6 eggs. And I don't remember if they said it or if they just handed it to me. But yeah, you're right. It's like the outpatient thing. You just have the curtains and it's just a bunch of beds. So there's a bunch of people in there. And it's right in the clinic. They have it right in the clinic. It wasn't at a hospital. It was in the clinic. They have their own procedure area, right? Um, yeah, I just remember like thinking, oh my God, thank God. But for listeners who have not gone through infertility or anyone who hasn't done IVF yet, um, just because you have a high number of eggs does not mean that you are golden ticket. Like, God forbid, you know, but it doesn't mean like you have 6 eggs or you're going to have 6 embryos because that doesn't happen, you know?
Absolutely. Egg count does not equal embryo count. Agreed.
No. So after they retrieve the 6 eggs, it takes about a week for them to put the sperm and the egg in the petri dish, right? Let's say. And then I don't know, your procedure was a little different, but ours, they just had it in the petri dish and then the sperm and the egg connect to make what they call a blastocyst. And then you hope that those make it to day 5. I believe that's correct. Day 5, where it's a healthy embryo. So ours, a week later, you're dying for that phone call. So we had 6 eggs retrieved. It made it to 3 embryos. But that was massive for us because like I think they call you like a couple days before to let you know, like I think day 3, and they let you know. So our numbers had gone down. It was like
Yes.
5, then 4.
Yes.
And I was like, oh boy. Yeah. So when they said 3, I remember I was on prep period out and I was in my classroom and I literally was like, oh my God, thank God. I felt like such a weight just release. And then I called my husband and I could hear like him almost on the verge of tears, like, oh, thank God. And he's like, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. So, yes and no. It was okay. It wasn't okay. We, after the retrieval, you have to wait about a month to get your period, and then you start up the medications again to get your body ready for the transfer. So lots of time and lots of procedures and lots of visits to the doctor. I mean, we were going to the doctor 3 and 4 times a week with IVF um, for monitoring and all that. And so this was about November. We did our first transfer right before Thanksgiving. And, when you do your transfer, we did frozen transfers. I know there's also fresh transfers. I don't think that was an option for us. That was never like talked about for us, but for
I
us,
feel
it
like
was
they
just
like make
frozen.
it
Was yours?
seem they make it like seem like food. They're like frozen or fresh, frozen or fresh.
So true. And I was like, fresh, what's that mean? What does that do? I don't know.
Yeah.
Once I found out like later on, I was like, okay. Like there's just so many different details and things within IVF and infertility that is still to learn, right? And it's always different for everybody.
And I don't know if you
Go ahead.
remember this, but it was actually because I had a few girlfriends during the time going through IVF too, maybe like one or two at most. And I don't know if you remember this, but they grade the embryos. Do you remember that? So
Yes.
they'll
Yes.
say like that embryo was like an AA or a B or a C. I feel like it was
Mm-hmm.
like AA or AB or like BB or what, like I can't
Wait,
remember all the grading.
all the letters. Wait, and did you have your embryos tested?
No.
Okay, so neither did we.
And you know
So,
what? It's so funny, but
go ahead.
it was so funny. I remember this is the funniest thing. I have to share this. I have a friend, and she goes, oh my gosh, this is great. She goes, I have, I think she had two embryos, right? And
Mm-hmm.
one was graded a C. Okay, so a C, right? So,
Right.
like, when you hear this, I think a lot of people are like, ooh, a C. I remember she had me cracking up because she's like, what if I transfer this C? And there is, all these issues because it was a C and a C. And I was like, listen, a C is not an F, right? Like a C is you are still able to have a beautiful baby. And it's so funny because like
Mm-hmm.
even now, like she now has her son and her daughter. And her son was like supposedly like the C embryo. And so she'll be like, she'll laugh and she'll say things like, do you think that it's because he was a
Is a
C? And I'm
C?
like, come on, girl. Come on. Come on. I was like, you gotta let it go. You gotta let that go.
That's
Oh my
so
gosh, it was just so
funny.
funny. But I remember that. And I remember being like, I don't care what the letter is as
Right.
long as it
It's
works, right?
healthy. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. That is it. Well, so I don't remember what letters my embryos were. I remember saying to him, pick whatever embryo you think is the best quality or the best. And that's what we did first, right before Thanksgiving. And it was before Thanksgiving. We got the call after Thanksgiving. But so you have your transfer, your pupo, pregnant until proven otherwise. And
Yes.
so the other hard part of infertility too is when you're going to holidays and gatherings and events and you have all this stuff going on, you also can't be drinking and doing certain things on these medications. So you could not have had a transfer, which has happened, and I was on medications and I couldn't drink. Well, what do people think when you're not drinking? They give you the look. They ask you questions. Are you, maybe you're pregnant? And that is like, oh my God, a knife to your freaking heart, and
Of
it's so
course.
hard to have. I even pretended I would pour myself a glass of wine, pretend to sip, go to the bathroom, pour the wine out in the sink, like just pretend. That sucked. That was horrible. Like you had to do what you had to do.
Because you were wasting the
And
wine. Is that why it was so horrible for you?
no, I was probably like, fuck, damn it. I should probably put explicit on this episode with all my
Probably should.
F
Probably
bombs.
should on that one.
You know me, you know I like to swear. My mom, I'm so sorry.
That's
Oh my
okay.
God. But yeah, so, but the first transfer, right before we did IVF, I did tell my entire family. I told friends, I told coworkers, because I knew it was just going to be so much more and I didn't know what was going to happen. I just wanted everybody to know, especially work, because there was sometimes I was coming to work late because there was such a backup at the fertility clinic. So at this point, everybody knew it was November of 2019. We did our first transfer. And of course, everybody wants to be supportive and they're asking questions, but it's so much on your brain. So we go through Thanksgiving. At this point, my family knew, so they didn't ask questions. I wasn't drinking. I was acting like I was pregnant. I was not eating anything that I wasn't supposed to.
Yeah.
And then, a couple days after Thanksgiving, we get the call from my doctor again. And I knew this time. I saw the number come up and I was like, it didn't work. And I thought it was low after IUI, that one. And then I saw it in my husband's face, like, how did it not work? And my doctor was just like, it just wasn't the right embryo. And
Right.
I was like at a crossroads. We were honestly like, do we go on? Like I couldn't take much more. I couldn't take it
Yeah.
physically, I couldn't take it mentally. Um, and also during this exact time, my dad um had become sick. He had become sick with back pain and stomach issues, and we couldn't figure out what was going on. He was in the hospital for a little while. They thought it was pancreatitis. He went home. He wasn't getting better. We couldn't figure out what was going on, and it was happening for all of November, um, and then into December. And at the same time, we were moving forward with our second round of IVF, our second transfer, I should say. Um, doing all the drugs again, doing all the injections, and also a shout out to my husband for stepping up to the plate and giving me my injections in my ass. Thank you. Where we,
Testosterone and oil.
oh, it's so lovely. He did a really good job for somebody who used to faint at the sight of needles. So he did a really
Oh,
good job.
John. Oh, good job, John. Good job.
So we went on, we did all the usual monitoring, went for our second transfer. The first transfer, my husband was with me, but the second one, it was around Christmas. And I was nervous of the holiday schedule, blah, blah, blah. But RMA, they don't mess around. There's no holiday schedule. Like they work up until the very
Hmm.
last minute. So we did our transfer. I thought it was going to be after Christmas. We did our transfer on December 23rd of 2019.
Oh.
And my husband was home with Tyler this time, and I went in by myself actually. And you know, I was okay. And in my head, I was like, we're gonna go, we're gonna go through these two embryos, and whatever happens, happens. So this was embryo number two, and I don't know if it was being on winter break, being home. I put myself on bed rest for a good 2 or 3 days. I usually hosted Christmas Eve, and I told them no. I said, I'm not hosting, I'm not doing anything. So I was on a bed rest myself. My doctor did not say I needed to go on bed rest. I did it because I wanted to try something different than what I did the first time. And I don't know if it was that Christmas magic or whatever, but it worked. And New Year's Eve of 2019, we got the call at 9:30 in the morning from my nurse saying that we were pregnant.
Oh, I
So,
love that.
hallelujah. Hallelujah. We fell to our knees. John was crying, I was crying, and then I picked up the phone. I was like, "Oh my God, I'm sorry. I'm still here." It
She love that
was
so much.
it was something, and um it was just surreal. It was surreal. After all those months and years of trying and trying and trying, all of a sudden it worked, it's like, holy shit, thank God, thank God. But like, didn't cure anything. I mean, we were happy. Thank God we were happy. It worked. Everything was okay. And then, the doctor or the nurse is like, okay, these are your levels. You're going to come in on this day to check, and then you go for your ultrasound. And at the same time, it was the first week of January. Um, and my dad was continuing to get worse. We saw him at Christmas time. And we all noticed that he had lost a lot of weight. And I knew then and there it was not good. And the first week of January, just a few days after we found out we were pregnant, he got his diagnosis that it was pancreatic cancer and it was stage 3 at the moment. And then fast forward, a couple weeks later, it had already gotten to stage 4 and it was metastatic.
Such
So,
an aggressive cancer,
oh,
I've
such an
heard
aggressive
pancreatic
cancer.
cancer in general can be very aggressive cancer, let alone like
Yes.
it seems like the one that your dad had. The
Hmm.
variation was for it to develop so quickly.
Yeah.
It's
And
heartbreaking.
and it's hard. It was absolutely heartbreaking and just horrible to watch that disease take him so quickly. Um, I wish I could say that it was a happy ending, but for him and for me, well, no, it was for me. Let me take that back. But it was not an easy road.
Yeah.
As he was progressing, um, I had and we share this similarity. I had bleeding happen. Um, and it got really, really bad at several occasions. One at home, one while I was in the middle of teaching and I had to leave work. I mean, multiple times I thought I was miscarrying.
Yeah.
And we found out it was a subchorionic hematoma. Um, and it's where it's like a pocket of blood. Like mine was like the same size as the gestational sac. Um, and it just, a pocket of blood. It can happen implantation. It can happen for various reasons, I believe. It's pretty
It
common when you
often
do
happens with
IVF.
implantation, though. I mean, I remember
Yeah.
looking up information on this, and I remember reading specifically that because of the needle, right? So, very, very tiny needle that they're using to implant this very tiny little embryo.
Yes.
And it can just, because that tissue is so sensitive and so, um, what's it called? Like blood supply, just even the tiniest
Oh,
nick can
Nick.
create these hematomas. But it's also the biggest thing that I know a lot of the fertility doctors look at is like, where's the location of the hematoma, right? Is it right above the gestational sac? Is it to the side? Is it
Right.
below? They don't like right above because as it is,
Going,
working
like going
itself
through the
out,
body.
it
Yeah.
can actually push, it can cause a miscarriage for that reason. So I know that they
Yes.
have a tendency of saying, at least I know they did with me, we don't want to give you false hope. This could end in a miscarriage for that reason.
Hmm. They said that in so many words in the beginning. It was like right before the hematoma
Yeah.
when they couldn't find the gestational sac. And they said, we just want to prepare you, like, just be prepared. We're going to have you come back in 3 days and see if we can find it, but just be prepared if it's not there. And I was like, are you kidding me right now? Like, you have to wait.
Awful.
It's horrible. You go through all of that and then you have that happen to you. But I think it's pretty common with um, IVF. I think several people get subchorionic hematomas.
Oh,
Um, Thankfully, it did work itself out short by the end of my trimester. My dad had gotten very, very sick, and they did lots and lots of procedures. And I had taken leave from work, and my brother and my sister and I would take turns taking care of him at the hospital and being there and, just to be there as much as possible. and it's crazy that there were times I forgot I was pregnant. I completely forgot I was pregnant and being there. And I mean, I wasn't eating. It was rough. It was just crazy. You're supposed to be happy and have this happy thing that you have been waiting years for, and um then you watch your dad literally die in front of you. And it sucks. But you know, we were able to tell him beforehand, and um, he was, of course, elated. And my sister um, and I talked about it, and she was like, we were all so happy. And then I realized he's not going to be here for her, for it. We didn't know it was a girl, um, and that was hard to think about. But he had passed February 24th, 2020. Um, Literally just like 3 weeks before COVID lockdown. And then that was after he passed. I was still having some minor bleeding. It wasn't as bad as it was, um, but it didn't completely go away until after he passed away. And I thought about that later. I'm like, huh, and whether you believe in those things or not, I definitely do. I absolutely think that he had something to do with it, and I absolutely think that he helped to bring her side.
Yeah.
Um, so after that, it was somewhat smooth sailing of pregnancy, and then my daughter was born on September 2nd, 2020, and it was definitely different, pregnancy and birthing that I had hoped for in my mind with COVID lockdown and everything that people were scared of with pregnancy, and
Was John able
so
to be in
much
there with
worry.
you or no?
Only him, and we had to wear masks. No one else could be there. And he was allowed to leave the hospital once per day. I mean, this was September. It wasn't, March or April. He was allowed to leave once per day. And if it was more than that, he was not allowed to return. Um, so he didn't even leave, honestly. Um, and yeah, we were there for just a few days, had a planned C-section, and which was glorious, so much better than my first. And yeah,
You played a
and
big part in me having a planned C-section. I remember I was
I
on a group
did.
text with you and our mutual friend,
Yeah.
and you both were like, do the planned C-section because there was
Hmm.
always, I remember that. I was like, wait, but don't you think I should try to like experience? And you're like, no, do the planned C-section because listen,
I don't
our
remember
our
that.
little listeners here, my daughter was like basically they were taking bets on how large she was going to be, how much she was going to weigh. They were like, she may be like an
Stop.
11 pounder. And I was like,
Oh
oh my
my
goodness.
God.
Yeah.
Stop it. Wait, how many pounds was she?
She was 9 pounds, 10 ounces.
Damn. Oh my God. You
But
what
like
a
I
healthy
remember that. I
baby.
remember that very vividly that you were like, do the plan. I was like,
Yeah.
are you sure you're like, do the plan C-section? And I was like, you're right, you're right, you're right. And
Well,
it was probably the best advice you ever gave me to this day of like, do the plan
oh God.
C-section. So thank you. Thank you for that
You are
one.
welcome. You are welcome. Yeah, if my son, it was terrible. I mean, I had to be induced. I did all the drugs under the sun. I blew
Oh
up
my
like a
gosh.
balloon, and then I ended up having a C-section anyway, and the recovery was horrendous.
Ugh.
So, yeah. So, anyway, that is I tried to make it short, but I don't think there's a short way around it because
There's no
this
short
is
way.
this is in depth.
Sure.
And I
Sure.
wanted to make it clear for like listeners who don't know the basics of treatments and things like that. Um, which brings me to like another thing. Like I knew when I was going through all of this, nobody knew what infertility was, including myself. But like my family and friends really didn't have an idea, and society didn't talk about it. And when I tried to look for things to help me, to comfort me, there are books that was either medical or made jokes about it. And like when I was in it, I was not laughing. I was very I was probably depressed and angry most of the time. So I decided to share my story and I wrote it down on a piece of paper, like all the big aspects that affected me, and um, turned it into a memoir that has helped and I hope to continue to help other women, men, anyone who is trying to become a parent through, science and fertility treatments. I hope that it brings comfort because it was like a journal for me, and I wrote it in real time as I was going through everything. And Vicki is also in the book because we resonated so much with
Yeah.
so many things.
Yeah.
So I feel like that was the first step in healing from all the trauma from infertility and losing my dad and all of it. Um, and I feel like we continue to do that every single day in many different ways because it's always going to be a part of us, which is
Absolutely.
something I didn't realize, you know?
You never kind of realize it, right? Until you're going through it, and then until you're really on the other side of it, and you're like, wow, there are still certain triggers or certain trauma
Yes.
responses that come up for me when, or comes up for anyone, right? When these areas of your heart or your mind or your soul are impacted again, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
I think that it's really beautiful that you were able to put words to your journey, that you
Thank
were able
you.
to write your memoir. That was such a beautiful passion project for you. You could
Yes,
tell just by
definitely a
the
passion.
way that you wrote it. I was so honored when you asked me to provide you with some like feedback and perspective around my own experience. Um,
Yeah.
because, who gets to be in a book often? It's kind of cool, right? It's kind of
Right.
cool.
It is. And I wanted to show like how, even though when I was going through it, I didn't know many people that experienced it. But once I started talking about it, I realized you had gone through it along with other people from high school that we knew. So I have a few friends in there, my sister, and then an interview with my husband in there because I wanted to show how how common it is within your own circle of family and friends. Everybody
Absolutely.
is it. I mean, now it's 1 in 6 people struggle with infertility or diagnosed with infertility.
I think, and obviously that has led to this podcast, right? This is why we have
Right.
such a passion for sharing our stories, not just about our fertility, but also like who we have become since our fertility. So, can I ask
Yes.
you
Yes.
a few questions? Okay.
Of course.
In your opinion, what has your secondary infertility taught you about yourself?
It has, it's, when you're in it, you don't think you're going to learn a lesson, or learn about yourself. But it was probably the pivotal point of realizing who I am mentally and physically. I mean, let me give you an example. I used to be a pushover. I used to be a people pleaser. I used to, people would say things to me and I would just like kind of laugh it off. But really, it was like a passive aggressive comment that really wasn't nice. And I wouldn't say anything and I would just let it go. And I would just kind of take it to heart and, internalize that. So infertility kind of showed me people's true colors, and how I'm not going to put up with it anymore. And don't get me wrong, I'm not like an intern into some asshole. I'm still
No, you're
still
just a
a nice
boundary setter.
person.
You're a boundary
Yes.
setter.
Yes, thank you. That is the word. I I definitely put up boundaries. I stand up for myself more. Um, I'm definitely more confident in who I am. And, you know, but I've worked hard on that for the past 7 years. I mean, I worked through the trauma like with personal development and listening to podcasts or going to therapy and waking up early to have time for myself. Um, those are, and working out every morning. Like those are big things that I started slowly that really, even when I was on my journey, that really helped me become who I am and kind of work through that trauma too.
How did you feel like your fertility journey affected the relationships around you?
So kind of like a little bit what I was saying, um, but it was a big eye opener. Um, More so like at work too. You would notice more comments that just weren't right. Um, you know, it came along with questions like, when Tyler was 2 and 3, and people would ask, like, when are you going to have another one? And those questions would come on. Like, it really made me realize, like, okay, that's none of your business. And it just kind of opened my eyes to what people were really about. Um, and then, but also, it also showed me some friendships that I didn't come to ever think about. Some people really showed up and helped me. Like, you remember the people who help you during your tough times. And I'm lucky to say that I have several, like really helped. I mean, I had friends who helped take care of Tyler when I had to go to the doctor or took him to work. My friend Stacy, she took him to work with her to her classroom several mornings, and even after I had my daughter when I was in recovery from my C-section. Like, that is a true friend. So
Absolutely.
lots of
We need people
lots of
like that in our
friends.
lives. Sure.
Yes, we do.
Yes.
Yes, we do.
If you had to use a word to describe yourself now after your journey,
Hmm.
what would it be?
Resilient, hands down. I think, like, you go through so much in this journey, like physically and mentally and emotionally. And for you to come out onto the other side, like, thinking back about every single detail that we went through, um, thank God it was a miracle. Um, but it definitely made me strong mentally and physically, even though I didn't want to be. Um, and I'll say, like, I feel like my story was rough, but I think it was not as hard as I know others have had it. So I want to say that too. Like, I know there are other people who have really struggled even more so than me. So, every story is different. Um, it's not better or worse, but, I feel lucky to be where I am. Very, very lucky to be where I am today. Um, yeah.
This is a little bit of a two-parter. What is a
Yes.
message you want to give others going through fertility now? And also, the second part of this is what is the message that you want to give to the people who are on the other side of it?
Mm, okay. So I wish I took this advice myself when I was in it. I wish that, for anybody who's going through it right now, of course, you have to do what you feel the most comfortable. And first and foremost, you have to protect yourself and your peace. I'm going to quote Trent Shelton here. You have to protect your peace. You have to set up your boundaries. And that looks different for everybody. Some people might be open to talking about every single aspect of it, and other people are not, as I did not. You have to do what you feel is best. Um, you know, in my own experience, I wish that I had opened up sooner, because I think that was probably the very first step of healing myself and just talking about it, because I learned how many other people are going through it themselves. So I felt less alone the more I talked about it. It was still difficult, but it did help me a little bit. And for those who are on the other side of infertility, I want to say that I hope that you first realize how incredible you are. And also, I hope that you continue to choose yourself in your healing process, because I think this is still a healing could be for a lifetime for me. But you know, prioritizing you and your what makes you happy and your self-care for sure. That is definitely a very big part of my life, and I think it's very important.
I couldn't have said that any better.
Oh, thank you. Oh, wow, coming from
Thank,
a therapist
thank.
too.
Oh. And also, she also meant to say, and listen to our podcast. That's another
Yes.
message here.
And read
Thank you
my
so
book.
much.
Thank you.
Yeah, and read her book. Yes, and read her book. Can you actually tell us the title of your book, what so everyone
Yes.
knows?
So I'll also list it in the show notes, but yes, the B word. And if you haven't figured it out, the B word, B stands for baby, because all I got was, when are you going to have a baby? When's the next baby coming? Come on, you have to have a baby. Baby, baby, baby became a swear word in my head. So the B word, infertility and other conversations, is what it's called. So I hope you check it out, and you can find that on my website, which I'll put in the show notes too.
Thank you so much, Simona. I always appreciate hearing your story. You are a rock star girl.
Thanks, Vicki. And I can't wait for everybody to listen to your beautiful story in our next episode.
And
So I hope
before
you,
I was
yeah,
gonna say before we leave, we have to do our what was a
yes.
high or something that
Hmm.
you have loved or given yourself props for this week, and what is
Absolutely.
an area that you still want to work on.
So I have to tell you, my husband calls this rose and thorn, and we
I
all
know he
booed
does,
him.
but we're trying to be better, John. We're trying to do it differently.
Did I tell you this? I didn't know I told you this. So
No, 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 no. But I know everyone calls it all different types of things, like rose and thorn. But I was like, we're gonna make it sound
I don't
different.
like that. Yes, we're gonna make it sound different. I don't like the rose and thorn. But anyway, okay, so my high this week is definitely staying on top of like household things and um, working hard on things that make me happy, like painting or reading or whatever it is. A low, I feel like this will probably be a trend for like my life. I should probably talk to my therapist about this. No, uh, it's losing my cool again. It's just hard. Parenting is hard.
Oh, parenting is hard. I would also say
It
that
is
that's my
hard
low. I don't know why we keep on both having that, but like, yeah, I think it's probably because
because
of
it's
what our
hard.
kids' ages are. And
Yes.
yeah, that was also what I would say my low is. And my high, this is going to be like a very first world high, but like, if you know me, you're going to know that I'm really indecisive, really indecisive. And okay, indecisive when it comes to some things, right? I'm even indecisive in my comments on myself. I was going to say, I found a beautiful paint color that I'm using in my house. And I don't usually feel, I will put paint on the wall and think, oh, oh, do I
Oh,
really like it? And the high was I actually feel confident for probably the first
for
time in
your
like 10
kitchen?
years about
Yay.
a paint color. So that's my
That is
high.
so exciting.
Very first world here, people. But I was going to say, it's a win in my book. It's a
Hey,
win in my
that is a
book.
win. When you're decisive and you decide on the first time, hey, that is a
Of
huge win.
course. Of course.
Huge
But
win.
listen, we all hope that you come back and listen to us very soon. And
Yes,
thank you
thank you
again,
so
Simona.
much. Thanks for being here.
Bye.
See you on the next one.